All right, this is going to be a short one, mostly because I don't have enough time to really go into depth. One of the main problems today is that people tend to parse their comments and apologize for them or withdraw them more because of offense than because of inaccuracy or dishonesty. And if people really thought about it, they would realize that if somebody's saying something to offend you, you should probably be, thankful that you're at least you're being made aware of something that you should stay away from. Okay, it's much easier to deal with somebody who is outright hostile than somebody who is trying to deceive you and pull the rug from under you. And that's kind of an attitude that you probably only learn through, hard experiences and things like that. Rashida Tlaib, I would say, she definitely fits into both categories in terms of both hostility and duplicity. I respect her intellect. I think that based on the some of the statements I've seen from her, she is smarter than a lot of the other Democrats in the way that she presents herself. She's not a dumb person. And those people that would say so are, they're mistaken. But she did something pretty dumb this weekend when she made this statement.
Created something of a stir by coming out in favor of a one-state solution in Israel and Palestine. And I think you may be the only Democrat who's publicly supported a one-state solution. So what is your vision for a one-state solution that meets both Palestinian and Israeli or Jewish national aspirations?
Absolutely. And let me tell you, I mean, for me, just a few, I think 2 weeks ago or so, we celebrated, or just it took a moment, I think, in our country to remember the Holocaust. And there's a kind of a calming feeling I always tell folks when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust, and the fact that it was my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, the human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out, and some people's passport. I mean, just all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy and horrific persecution of Jews across the world at that time. And I love the fact that it was my ancestors that provided that.
So what she's saying is a little unclear. You could take it to be that she means that the Arab Palestinians that were in, British Mandatory Palestine during World War II, they had to basically endure the brunt of this immigration wave after the Holocaust, because the truth is that they were there and they had to suffer as a result of that. That's a common narrative among Palestinians. However, the way that it was perceived and the way that I think you could read it is that she was saying that the Jews were welcomed into British Mandatory Palestine, and therefore their country, and they were willingly sheltered there. That's not the truth. The truth of the matter is that whatever side you're on, you have to read what actually happened the way it is. Before the Holocaust itself happened, there was an attempted wave of Jewish immigration into British Mandatory Palestine as a result not only of German persecution of the Jews, but also of persecution in other countries. The Soviet Union, of course, was not the most hospitable place to be Jewish at the time, because they practiced basically state atheism, and they would essentially squelch any sort of organized religion. So there were waves of people leaving Poland, leaving Soviet Russia, leaving Germany, trying to get to other countries prior to World War II. And in fact, it's a big accusation that's leveled often against leaders of the Zionist movement, that they cooperated with the Germans in this policy known as Havara. Well, the Havara, which we could probably go into a different time, which means the passage, was this idea that, yes, they were being persecuted in Germany, and therefore the Zionist leaders would pay an indemnity to the Germans and have those citizens transferred into custody in British Mandatory Palestine in order to prevent them from being completely dispossessed and left. They didn't know that the Holocaust was going to happen. In fact, for those of you that don't know, the actual order to murder the Jews wasn't given until after World War II started. So at the time, in the 30s, especially prior to German expansion, annexation of Austria in 1938, the invasion of Poland in 1939, those things were kind of in the future. They didn't know that the Germans would end up having these ambitions to take over like most of Eastern Europe and eventually Western Europe. So the idea of collaborating with the Germans didn't have the same stigma at the time, because they thought, well, this is an anti-Semitic government, but they're not going to necessarily endanger us beyond the borders of Germany. Let's deal with them. Let's bring some of these people over to a safe country, and it would be British Mandatory Palestine. Now, this is the part that contradicts what Rashida Tlaib was saying, because in 1936, as a result of some of these waves of immigration, Arab leadership in British Mandatory Palestine, and I say Arab because they were not called necessarily Palestinians. A lot of them were not even born in the region known as Palestine today. For example, the religious leader who was one of the main inspirations for it, who was killed before it, Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam, was born in Hama, which is in, of course, modern-day Syria. There's still a battle going on there today in Syria. So those people were rejecting this immigration of Jews into British Mandatory Palestine because it was seen as a corrupting influence on the social and religious life over there, because a lot of these people were more cosmopolitan. They came from, of course, the West. They had a different set of social values. It was, in essence, a xenophobic movement. Understandable, let's all be honest, not everybody likes new people coming, but still xenophobic towards these people. And this is actually an explanation from a Palestinian / sympathetic viewpoint.
Palestinians launched two popular uprisings against the Jews and the British blatant pro-Zionist policies. The first took place in 1929 and claimed hundreds of Palestinians and Jewish lives. The second, in 1936, was practically a small-scale war between the Palestinians and the British, who were also aided by the Zionists. It lasted for 3 years, and in the end, approximately 5,000 Palestinians died. The British also exiled the Palestinians' leadership and dismantled all Palestinians' paramilitary units. The Palestinians were left defenseless and leaderless.
Severe violations of human rights and civil rights in Palestine today. Most of these violations were invented not by a Jewish Zionist mind, but by British mandatory authorities in the war against the Palestinians between 1936 to 1939.
Okay, so we're not going to go through this whole clip, but this is Professor Ilan Pappé. I actually saw him in person. It's a long time ago, in fact. But he is an anti-Zionist Israeli professor at the University of Haifa. And he's basically setting the case that the Arabs did set up this popular resistance movement in the 30s in order to explicitly prevent the immigration of more Jews under this Zionist movement. And it failed. One of the tactics they employed was to have a strike in the naval port of Jaffa. Okay? And that actually went completely against their plan, because the Jews eventually just built a port in Tel Aviv, which is only a couple kilometers north. So the Arab Revolt of 1936 through 39 is a contradiction of Rashida Tlaib's entire premise that there was this welcoming, or whatever. So yeah, you could read it the way that I set it out originally, that they were victims of this circumstance in history. But the fact is that when you look at the actual facts, the Arabs were not, the Arab Palestinians were not sympathetic at any point. They did not want these people coming in either in any shape or form, because they saw them as invaders. They saw them as basically people who did not belong in the country. And in fact, if were it not for the Arab Revolt, it's possible that some of these people would have probably escaped the Holocaust. Okay? Now, are we going to make a moral judgment out of this? I'll let you guys decide. I don't really look at it as something that we should talk about being offended, or whether she's spitting on the graves of people who died 60 or 70 years ago. I don't really think that Rashida Tlaib made that statement with a clear head. I think she was basically kind of trying to, bulldoze her way through an interview, which was with Michael Isikoff, a journalist for Yahoo, and try to kind of, lay a lot of garnish where there's no main dish. That's really the problem with politicians today. They invent stuff out of nowhere, and it doesn't make any sense. This was just a lie. You can actually look it up here on procon.com. It says here, even Albert Hourani, who wrote the book for Oxford called The History of the Arab Peoples, says by the middle 1930s, it was becoming more difficult for Britain to maintain a balance between Arab and Jewish interests. The coming to power of the Nazis in Germany increased pressure from the Jewish community and their supporters in England to permit larger immigration, and immigration in its turn was changing the balance of population and power in Palestine. In 1936, the opposition of the Arabs began to take the form of armed insurrection. So you have Jewish and Arab sources, whether they're pro-Zionist or anti-Zionist or pro-Palestinian or not pro-Palestinian, anti-Palestinian, whatever. They all agree that this event happened. Rashida Tlaib just has to acknowledge the truth that this conflict was based on, intercommunal hatred at the time, especially on the part of some of the leadership of her people, and nobody really wanted to resolve it back then, and that's part of the reason it's not resolved till today. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to me also on BitChute and on Minds.com at Chef Leopard. Also, you can contribute on Subscribestar at Chef Leopard, and you can also follow me on Gab at Starscream85. I'll talk to you later. Have an awesome Monday.